Hello, I'm Harley.
Hi, I'm Bonnie.
And we're back with episode 2 of the Lewisham Youth Brain Health Radio Show. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been listening since episode 1, welcome back.
We are young people from Lewisham here to chat to you about all things brain health and dementia in a way that actually makes sense for us.
Yep, on the last episode, we talked about dementia and what makes you more likely to be diagnosed. And today, we're continuing with the conversation with Jackie and Pete to explore how dementia affects not just the people living with it, but their friends and families as well.
We've got our amazing radio crew. We're a part of a group called the Lewisham Youth Brain Health Champions. So shout out to Henry, Paul, Miguel, Jermaine and Jess.
So today we're exploring one big question. What's the impact of dementia?
And guess what? We have our special guest in the studio with us again.
Say hello to Jackie Parks. She's a dementia researcher at the University of Northampton and knows a lot about young onset dementia. She's currently the deputy chair of the research at Young Dementia Network.
And we are joined by Pete Middleton. He was diagnosed with young onset dementia and he's here to help us to understand his experiences.
Hey Pete and Jackie, it's great to have you back.
It's lovely to be back with you.
Yeah, hi.
As a quick recap for our new listeners, because we have mentioned it a couple of times now, Jackie and Pete, can you let our listeners know what dementia and young onset dementia are?
So dementia is it's a disease of the brain where the brain cells die for a variety of reasons, lots of different reasons. Sometimes that's due to mini bleeds in the brain where the blood seeps out and damages the cells a little bit in different areas of the brain. Other times it's because things like proteins build up and damage the areas of the brain. It affects people in different ways and in different parts of the brain. And it's for younger people, they are people who are under 65 when they're diagnosed. So yeah, it can start in different parts of the brain and for different reasons.
Wow, that's really interesting. Make sure you stay tuned for the rest of the episode. We're going to chat more to Pete and Jackie later. Now it's quiz time. Let's debunk myths about dementia.
We've got a guest in the studio who is going to take the quiz. Hello, what's your name?
Hiya, I'm Kitty.
So, here's how it works. We will ask you 3 questions about the impact of dementia. If you know the answer, tell us. And if you don't, you can ask us for multiple choice options or get help from Jackie or Pete. Jackie and Pete also let us...
I'm looking at you, Jackie.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Just because I can't see Pete.
Jackie and Pete will also let us know if the answer is right.
Do you understand the rules?
Yes, thank you.
Great, let's get started. First question. Which activities can help stimulate the mind of someone living with dementia?
Oh. Is this a multiple choice or do I just have to guess?
You can guess and then there's multiple options.
I'm going to guess that walking does. I'm going to guess listening to music, reading, puzzles and watching University Challenge. Do I have the answers or do I need to ask Jackie for help?
I think Jackie's going to answer.
Okay, I can give you some of those answers.
Please.
I'd like to hear from Pete though as well. I'm sure he has a view on it. But basically the brain does need a lot of oxygen and nutrients and look after your heart, you look after your brain. So, we need to exercise that brain. We need to connect it. We need to, do some walking, keep fit, keep our bodies active. It's always good for the brain. But I'm wondering what Pete's answer might be.
Well, what keeps me sharp is challenging myself. So being a guest on a radio show like this is good for my brain health. Doing creative things is good for my brain health. Puzzles, games, sports. So many things are good for my brain health.
We do a lot of work with people in the early stages of dementia, and what we're doing is we're trying to get the healthy parts of the brain to keep working well and keep connecting with, and if we look after those healthy parts, we think we can sort of delay things a little bit. So we do a lot of work with social connection and cognitive. We call it cognitive games and activities. Really good for getting the brain to stay healthy.
Cool. So keep challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how like both physical and like mental challenges can improve your brain health. On to the next question. How can you support someone living with dementia?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a hard question. I'm sure that's a question that lots of people do struggle with.
Would you like the multiple choice options?
Yeah, I'd like to hear them.
So option A is avoid talking to them. Option B is speaking loudly and quickly. And option C is being patient, using clear communication and maintaining routines.
Okay, well, I definitely think it's option C. I think option C should really go for anyone that you live with and that you're trying to support in life. But yeah, option C seems good. I mean, the being patient is definitely important. I'm guessing when you're waiting for someone to sometimes get their words out and things, to not hurry them or speak for them, I would imagine is important.
Yeah, it is option C. Jackie or Pete, do you have anything to say about how you support people with dementia?
Yeah, it's very much about treating people as adults. Don't assume that because they're having trouble finding a word, they can't hear you. Talk to them in adult sentences and conversation. But obviously give people chance to answer and don't give too many choices in a single sentence. You've just got to keep things clear and good eye contact. So good what we call non-verbal communication, because they read your eyes. But I don't know if that's your experience, Pete.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head, Jackie. In fact, both of you have, because patience is the key, Sometimes I'll have a bit of trouble finding the right word, but I'll find it in the end. Just please don't try and find the word for me, because you're bound to find the wrong one. And then I'll lose my train of thought and have to start all over again. So yeah, just give me a bit of patience. If I'm in front of you at the ATM and I'm having trouble remembering my PIN, don't get impatient with me, please. I'll get there.
Thank you for that. The last question is, when it comes to dementia, what do you think sundowning means?
Sundowning? I've never heard that word in my life, apart from in association with Sundown Festival, which I'm guessing is not what you mean. Okay, so it's not a park where Chase and Status headlined. Sundowning. Something to do with sunset? Jackie's trying to do charades to me, but I'm not getting it. I've got no idea. Is there a multiple choice option in this one, or could Pete or Jackie enlighten me? Okay, multiple choice, please.
So, option A is an allergy to sunlight. Option B is a cure for dementia. And option C is increased confusion and agitation during the late afternoon or evening.
Okay, well, I'm guessing option C, but I'd love to know why and where that term comes from, what it means.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I don't think we really understand why it comes at that particular time of day, but there is certainly a correlation with this sort of time of day and people perhaps walking more or wandering more or becoming a little bit more agitated, particularly when I'm a mental health nurse by background, and when I used to work on the wards with people with dementia, tea time was always a time of more movement and more sort of agitation, or not agitation, but confusion. And whether that's something to do with the light changing or the routine, we're not 100% sure, but it's certainly a thing and an event that we all know of when we work in care homes or in hospital wards. So yeah, this time of day.
Wow. That was really interesting. Before this episode, I didn't know what sundowning was, so it's okay that you didn't know. Thank you, Kitty, for doing our quiz, and let's keep the conversation going. It's now time to hear more from Jackie about her work. Welcome back, Jackie. For those listeners that didn't tune into episode 1, can you reintroduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Jackie. I live in South Leicestershire. As you've already heard, I work at the University of Northampton. I set up and founded my own Dementia Research and Innovation Centre there. So most of the work I do is research for the university. That's I work for them full time, and I tend to focus on early stages of dementia, and also, as you've heard, young people who are under 65 when they get diagnosed. And I do a lot of work looking at different cognitive interventions, so different activities for the brain to try and keep it healthy in the early stages, so to try and delay onset a little bit. I also work in my spare time. I have a company where we work with people in the community, so I still work as a nurse, working with families with people with dementia. And I do a lot of work with those. I certainly do case reviews, and I work with families to help them to cope with dementia. I do a lot of work. We also do work with schools. So we work with local schools. We're actually based in Leicestershire on a secondary school site. And we do a lot of work with young people looking at dementia awareness, how to look after your brain so that, you give your brain a chance as you get older. We do a lot of woodwork with people in schools, with our members with dementia, cooking. We do a lot of activities between our centre and the schools in the area. So I do a lot of research, as I said, in early intervention, but I also teach about dementia, and I also work as a nurse still in the area of dementia. So that's me.
It's really cool that you still get to do so many different things. We're really excited for you to share what you've learned over the years with our listeners so that we can raise awareness for dementia.
You've done loads of work on dementia. Your background is in nursing, and as a part of the University of Northampton, you involve the public and patients in dementia research. What have you learned about how dementia affects people who have been diagnosed?
That's a really interesting one, I think, and I'm going to bring Pete in on this in a moment, but I think it's really important to challenge society's views on people with dementia. People with dementia, their intellect stays the same. Their ability to think might make decisions might have changed, but they're still the people they were, with the jobs they did and the families they had. And I think it's really important to give them chances, certainly in the early stages of getting involved in jobs and volunteering. And all of the people I work with, speak at international conference or get involved in research projects. And some of those people with dementia even lead research projects. So I think it's really important, that we see the person at the other end not as somebody who is a patient or a sufferer. We don't use those kind of language anymore. People with dementia are people, and we're trying to tell society about that. But I'll bring in Pete at this stage and see if I'm successful, seeing as Pete and I work quite closely together.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, Jackie. We're at our age, everybody's got something wrong with them. Dementia's one thing, but the more you keep busy, I think the more the longer you'll last, if you know what I mean. And I'm certainly kept busy. I mean, I was diagnosed with young onset dementia at the age of 64. I was still at work, and it was a bit of a shock. It took me 2 years to get a diagnosis. But since then, I mean, I had two choices, didn't I? I could have sat back and done nothing, given up, because dementia is a life-limiting illness. There's no cure. So either you just give up or you think, okay, I've still got plenty of skills. That diagnosis didn't instantly flick a switch and make me useless. So I dedicated myself to being an advocate for dementia, to taking part in research projects to spreading the word that people with dementia are just people, and that it can affect anybody. Could be one of your teachers, could be your mother, your father. It could be anybody, but they're still the person that they always were, and they still have a lifetime of skills to offer. And so I'm a blogger. I do podcasting. I'm doing an interview for ITV Anglia day after tomorrow, actually. So I don't expect it to be as professional as this one, but I'm looking forward to it. I keep myself busy. I do a lot of public speaking. I run a comedy workshop. I do clowning courses, all sorts of stuff, weird stuff. But I can still do it, and all the time I can still do it. I will do it, and and part of what I want to do is encourage other people too, with a diagnosis of dementia, to get out there and just keep doing stuff.
I think it's really inspiring that you still get out there and you do and achieve so many different things. And also, we'll definitely be looking forward to your next little interview. Jackie, you also established the Lutterworth Share and Care Group for people with dementia and their carers. What can you share about the impact of a dementia diagnosis on their friends, family and carers? How are they impacted?
So for me, I set up the group in my local town, basically because I felt I had the skills and I wanted to help local people and support them, and that's what I did. So what we noticed is that often when somebody gets a diagnosis, the family members don't know what that means. They don't know how to get information. They don't know how to look after that person. They don't get trained in how to be a carer. They don't know what that's going to look like and what that role might be. And for some period afterwards, there's maybe a bit of shock at what suddenly happened. Plans for the future may need to change, or they might even, in the case of people with a younger onset, the children might still be at home and they've got to work with the young people to think about how it might impact on their schooling or their college and all of that. So what we do is we try to work with people as early as possible with their families so that we can guide them and help them and train them and educate them as much as they want to and as much as they're open to that. To give them as much information as they can, to be there on the doorstep when they have a crisis or a bit of a concern. And then we get them, invite them to get involved in the research so we can work with them in research projects. And that keeps them really, really, their brains really active for those that have a diagnosis, but also the carers learn about how to support somebody. So we really do work with both the carers and the person with a diagnosis, and they feel supported. And we support about 160 people across Leicestershire and Northamptonshire. So quite a lot of people at the moment, and we take on average a couple a week who want to come and get some support from us. So that's what we do. We work alongside families.
Yeah, I think it's really important that there are groups like yours which are supporting everybody who is affected by dementia. There will be young people listening that maybe know or are young carers for someone living with dementia. What resources and support are out there for these young people?
So I think we've got a little bit better at supporting families than perhaps we used to do. I know the Alzheimer Society produce leaflets and resources. Certainly there are more resources now for primary schools, and there are different types of booklets available for young people of secondary school age as well. I don't think it's perfect yet. I think we can do a lot more to support the children, certainly of people who have a dementia. I do know of a colleague of mine in Sheffield, Professor Pat Sykes, who's done particularly worked with young people in families, the young people in the families of somebody who's got a dementia. So there is some work out there, and I know it's growing, but I think we could do more. And I think we could do much more to help young people in schools and spread the message like yourselves. I think, dementia awareness in schools, how to look after your brain. It's so, so, so important that we think about looking after our brain and keeping it healthy for when we get older. Seems a long way off when you're a young person to being old, but we have to look after our brain as we look after the rest of our bodies.
Well, yeah, that's part of our aim. We want to, help young people in learning more. But thank you for sharing your work with us. This has really helped us and our listeners understand the impact of dementia.
It's now time to have our conversation with Pete, someone who has first-hand experience of what living with dementia is actually like.
Pete, for the listeners who didn't tune into the last episode, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, Pete Middleton. Been diagnosed nearly 7 years now with young onset dementia. To be specific, Alzheimer's disease, because as you know, dementia is like an umbrella term that covers, hundreds of different conditions. Alzheimer's disease being the most common. It's a life-limiting illness, and over time, I find things more challenging day to day in my life because my short-term memory is not as good as it used to be, and other parts of my brain are affected. But the brain is a very complex machine, and who knows what parts of it are going to be affected by your dementia. For me, it's often my balance. As you can hear, it's not so much my speech, although I do sometimes struggle to find the right words to finish a sentence. I find that I'm still managing to develop coping strategies to help me when I come across something I can't do as well as I used to. I still drive, and I'm convinced that looking after my brain health is prolonging my overall general health and sort of retarding the decline into dementia that I see so many other people going through. Other people I know who live with dementia, and I know lots of them, some of them go downhill fast. Part of that, I think, is because of their clinical dementia. Part of it also is because they just give up. They just feel like they haven't got any worth anymore. And that's such a shame. Society tends to disenable people who have dementia. It tries to do everything for us. It doesn't let us challenge ourselves very much. And I think that's just not right. That's not helping us. Challenge is good for everybody, isn't it? I remember at school I was in the printing club. I used to do all the out-of-school activities because I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to do something new all the time and learn something new. And I still do that now. It keeps me busy. It keeps me healthy. And I work with Alzheimer's Society. I work with Dementia UK. I work with anybody who'll have me. I work with Jackie a lot on some projects, especially some young dementia projects, which are really exciting because there's a lot of work to do out there. And I'm a very opinionated person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for your explanation of what dementia is and for introducing yourself. We really appreciate you being here to debunk the myths around dementia. Myths like people don't do much once they've been diagnosed.
We're going to ask you a few questions about living with dementia, but we know it is very personal, so only share what you feel comfortable speaking about. So, can you tell us how you found out you had dementia?
Yeah, sure. I'm an open book, by the way, so I've got no secrets from you or any of your listeners. I was at work as a police community support officer looking after vulnerable people in Northampton. And I began to realise that I couldn't do the job as well as I used to. Couldn't figure out why. But, when you're looking after vulnerable people and their welfare, it's a big worry when you think that you can't do that job as well as you used to. And the way I always look at it is that I felt like one of those circus acts where people have got plates on sticks and they're juggling them and spinning them and trying to keep them in the air. And they rush to and fro trying to keep all those sticks in the air. And I had a feeling that I couldn't do that any longer and that some of those plates were going to fall and smash and that each of those plates was a vulnerable person. I tried to tell my bosses, but they didn't understand. They accused me of being lazy and I had a nervous breakdown. And as a result of that, I was off of work for a long time, misdiagnosed, and with anxiety and depression. And as you might know from listening to me, I'm the least depressed person you've ever met. I'm always happy. But I was sort of put on the back burner. And it was an occupational health nurse who eventually realised that I might have the signs of dementia and got me a scan and to see a neurologist that proved that I do actually have Alzheimer's disease. And that's the problem for many of us people with young onset dementia. You see, we don't fit the stereotype. We don't look like the old, doddery, wrinkly person that people expect when they see dementia.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience. I know that must have been very difficult for you to be misdiagnosed. How has your life changed since you found out that you're living with dementia?
Well, it was a big shock, but actually it was quite a relief because at least I knew then what the problem was. And when you know what the problem is, you can start to do something about it. You can work out a plan. So I sat down with my whole family, my daughters and my wife, Pam, and I laid my cards on the table and said, this is my diagnosis. This is what's in store for me or for all of us. How can we sort things out so that there's no burden on anybody or as little as possible? So we had all those awkward conversations about end of life and what if I had to go into care and all that sort of stuff, and got them tidied out of the way and figured out what we do. And then I would figure out what to do with the rest of my life, because how do you fill your time? I loved my work. It was very satisfying, but when you're not working any longer, you've got a lot of time on your hands. So I thought, well, what can I still do to be useful? And then I realized that there's a heck of a lot to do. When I see so many other people giving up, I thought, well, I'm not going to stand by and watch other people just give it up. Good people with a lot to offer who feel that they haven't got anything anymore. I want to encourage them to step up to the mark and do stuff. And so that's what I do.
Thank you, Pete. It's really interesting to find out how it went with your family and stuff. What advice would you give someone who has just been diagnosed with dementia?
I say take a deep breath and study a little bit. When you're given a shock like that and someone tells you that you've got an illness for which there's no cure, it's a bit of a worry, of course. And you go through a process of being angry, frightened, in denial, all of those things. That's perfectly natural. It's like a grieving process. But what's not natural is if you're still doing that a year in or 6 months in, you've got to get over it and look forward and forget about the things that you can't control and think about the things that you can control. Okay, there's a process going on now. I've got some degeneration in my brain. How do I slow that down? How do I make the good times last as long as they can? What am I going to do every day so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to have the best day I can have? How do I ease the burden on my carer and on my family? How do I do all that stuff? So get everybody round, let everybody know what the score is and let them be comfortable with it. And then just get on and just enjoy the things that you can still do.
Yeah, that's really good advice, and I'm sure it's going to bring a lot of hope to any other younger people who've been diagnosed with dementia. What's been the impact of your diagnosis for the people around you, like your friends and family?
Some of my friends don't speak to me anymore. I guess it's because they don't know how to speak to me, that they feel a bit embarrassed. And that's a shame because they have no reason to. I'm still beat. My wife, well, of course, when I got my diagnosis and they put that label around my neck that said dementia, they also put a label around her neck that said carer. So a big change for her. And that's my big worry. I don't worry about myself or, what will be. But I do worry that I might be a burden on Pam, my wife, further down the line, which is why, as I said earlier, I want to do everything I can to make that burden as light as possible by letting people know what my wishes are now so that when I can't speak anymore, I can't articulate them, they won't have to make those decisions for me, because it's a big burden.
Thank you for that, Pete. Is there anything else you want to say to the young people in Lewisham listening before we go on to the next part of the episode?
Well, yeah, one thing is I love Lewisham. I'm a South London lad. You can hear my accent. I haven't been back there since 1975 because I joined the Royal Air Force and got out. But it's still in my heart. My first job was in Brixton Market. I'm a Clapham lad, so I'm not that far down the road. But, you know, you're important. Young people are so important in getting the word out there, you know, and busting the stereotypes. You've got to bust those stereotypes that we're just wrinkly old prunes who have got no common sense and they're no worth anymore. You know, because we're not that. We're honestly not that. You know, we still got a lot that we can teach and a lot we can learn too, and learn from you. And that's why when I heard about the work you're doing, I was so excited about it. And if there's any way we can replicate that around the country, I'd love to see that done, because you're trailblazing with what you're doing now. And the people who are doing it are going to do a lot of good stuff for the dementia community. And there's an army of us out there now. There's nearly 500,000 of us, for goodness sake.
Yeah, thank you so much for being really open and for helping us to break some stereotypes around dementia.
Time for the final bit of the episode where we hear from young people in Lewisham.
We asked, what do you think living with dementia is like?
I would imagine it to be like pretty hard and also quite difficult for your families or friends. But yeah, I think it'd be very difficult, quite sad as well.
I think living with dementia is very difficult and really hard to live with, especially if you have family. It must be really tough times to go through.
I think it's really bad. It's going to be really detrimental to your relationships with your family, mostly because you're not going to remember memories that you've had in the past. Yeah.
It's going to be a struggle, especially affecting my family the most, as I'm going to lose a relationship, as I won't really remember them as much as before.
Personally, I think it's been really tough and difficult because people with dementia, obviously, if everybody's watched things, then it can really have an effect on their family and their everyday life. So I think it's going to be really tough.
I think it's awful, to be fair. Obviously, I don't have it, but from what I've seen around me, I think it's not a good thing to have. Obviously, waking up and forgetting things, forgetting your loved ones, it's not a nice experience to go through. I think that it's something that needs to be addressed, obviously, because it's just awful. It's just not nice now.
I feel like it can be kind of difficult. Sometimes you are able to recognize who's there in front of you, but other times you can be seeing a person several times and then you might not actually recognize them. You'll forget things like their name, age, date of birth. You just look and feel like a complete stranger to you.
I think living with dementia, I feel like it must be pretty hard for certain individuals in this world. Yeah, I wish that not to happen to anyone I know.
I think living with dementia is awful, as most people, as they grow older, as they lose their memories, they don't remember loved family members, and that can affect the whole family as a whole, and it's not good.
Jackie and Pete, what do you think about what the young people shared?
I thought that was really interesting, and a lot of people gave some really detailed, information as to what they think dementia is, and I think a lot of people do think dementia is a really negative thing, and because they sort of misunderstand it, they think that people with dementia can't do anything anymore. And I think it's really important, and Pete's really, really inspirational. Pete designed my logos for my dementia network, and he does a lot of amazing work. And I have, 21, 22 people who work in our young dementia network, and they do different projects and different research, and they perhaps do more now they've got dementia than they did before they had it. So, it's not all negative, and I think there's lots of good that those people do, and we're really having to say to young people and say to everybody, you know, dementia's not a great thing, but on the other hand, it's, as Pete said, not a death sentence, and people can do a lot of good work while they've got dementia. See the person, not the dementia.
Well, we wanted to say thank you for sharing everything with us today.
That's it for today's episode of the Lewisham Youth Brain Health Radio Show.
Big thank you to our guests, Jackie and Pete, and of course to you, our listeners, for listening all the way through.
On the next episode, Jermaine and Miguel will be talking with Kritika about ways to improve your brain health and prevent dementia. Trust us, you don't want to miss it.
Go to the Youth Involvement and Engagement YouTube channel if you want to catch up on our episodes.
This show is brought to you by the Lewisham Youth Brain Health Champions Programme. It is being coordinated by the Youth Involvement and Engagement Lab, the Lewisham Young Advisors, and the Spin Dementia Network Plus. It is funded by the Alzheimer's Research UK Inspire Fund and being recorded at Radio Lewisham.